Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, or it could be whiskey with an analyst reading a spreadsheet, linking crime events, identifying a series, and getting the latest scoop on association news and training. So please don't be that analyst and join us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
How we doing, analysts? Jason Elder here with another LEA podcast deep dive. Did you know with Mike Winslow? Mike, how we doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. All right, let's jump into it. What do we need to know today?
All right. So today's Did You Know? We're going to go with Did you know that the whole process for Google location data is going to be changing? So a couple different things that have occurred. So Google earlier this year has put out some information regarding the way that they will now be collecting and essentially storing the location data that they typically have on their Android devices. Before, they used to have that accessible and searchable for things like geofences and things of that nature. But they are going to now be taking the Apple route and be pushing that encrypted to the device itself. So this greatly changes the way that you can get that data now from Google.
All right. So let's get back up a couple of steps, just
Sure.
in case the listener has been not paying attention and they're like, what's geofencing? So let's just roughly go through that quickly and then the impact of what you just described.
Sure. So the Google geofence process has been around for a while now. I've had it personally with some cases with some great success, and I know a lot of others that have as well. Essentially, is doing a reverse location search through Google location data. Typically, it's going to be on the Android side as they're the ones that feed into Google. It can sometimes cross over into Apple devices if they have Google apps and appliances on that have location data being shared to them. Mm-hmm. But essentially, with a search warrant, we're able to draw a polygon, a radius, however you really want to search it, for Google, given a specific date and time frame, and be able to get location data back that occurred during that time frame that you're specifying. Now, there is a process that Google has done over the years. It's a 3-step process to where you don't just get to ask the first time and they give you all these people's location information as well as user data. They scale it into those 3 stages to make us still have to do the work to say, okay, this is the device I'm looking for, but now I need to send another stage to say, here's why I need more info on this device. And by the time you get to that 3rd stage is when you actually are getting any type of identification data related to that account.
Okay. So this can be obviously important with timelines and establishing where folks are in terms of crime scenes and locations. And you still needed a search warrant to get all this information. So how is what is happening now impacted this process?
So like I said, Google has announced that they're changing it in terms of the way that location data is going to be accessible. So essentially, once it's done, they will no longer be able to adhere to those search warrants to find that location data because it will be on the actual device itself. So it will impact that. The only caveat is, as of right now, even though they said that this is what they're going to, it's still not done yet. And people are still able to serve those warrants and still get data back. I haven't done one super recent, but I have heard ones that have been done recent. It seems like there's less and less that are coming back. So I'm thinking maybe they're getting rid of it, but it's just so much data that it's not just like a flip of a switch.
So this wouldn't be something with a new phone, upcoming phones. This would be with phone updates that they could possibly take it all out with just folks doing updates on their phone.
Correct. And on top of the changes as to them storing it on the device itself, they also are, with these updates, changing the retention times, that how long that data is even stored anyway. Google's always been big on letting their users be in charge of the data. Even before they made these changes, you could go into your Google account and actually look at all the data that Google is currently keeping, and then you could delete everything you wanted on your own right there. And Google would, I say delete, they just disassociate it with your Google account, because they make a lot of money off of selling that data, and you agree to that all the time through terms and services and whatnot. So they just don't make it associated to your Google ID anymore.
I see. So then in the future, the only way we're going to be able to do this geofencing stuff is if we have the actual phone and then put in a search warrant or whatever it is to then pull the data from the actual phone.
Right. So to get the location info, you're only gonna be able to get it from the device itself. So the days of being able to say, okay, here's my crime scene. I know this is where my crime occurred, or I got this guy on video here, and I'm trying to see if I can ID them and use the process that Google had to use that leverage that location data that they had. That part's just not going to be there anymore.
And so there was another bit of information regarding this as well in terms of a court case, right?
Yeah, there's been some recent court hearings, and really it's been one of those things that's gone back and forth amongst the courts when it comes to these geofence searches on whether or not they violate the Fourth Amendment. There was a ruling just last month in one of the courts of appeals that they actually ruled in a previous case from, I want to say it was like 2018 or 2019, that in fact the geofence process and search did violate the Fourth Amendment. Now this impacts the Fifth Circuit was, I think it was like Texas, Louisiana. There was like 4 or 5 states. That one currently, that was the court that did it. I think eventually it's one of those things that the Supreme Court is going to have to take on and actually make that ruling, because you've had other appellate courts that have also upheld that process and said that it is fine. There is no expectation of privacy with location data because at its essence, the user is agreeing to the terms, because they're in that laundry list that you got to go through to get the latest app or the update and things of that, or privacy policy has changed and you go, yeah, okay, whatever, get me to my game. That you are agreeing to it. Now, is it the best way, the most ethical way? Probably not, but maybe they need to change that process a little more, as opposed to and make sure people realize what they're agreeing to. I'm all for putting the responsibility on that person for that, to know like, hey, this is what they're going to do with that data, and just knowing that exists there.
Yeah. Now, does a user have the ability to shut it off now?
Yeah,
before there, like you could just say, hey, I don't want my phone tracked. I don't want it connected.
Yeah, you can, on both Apple and Android, they have the location services that you can turn off. Now, there are some apps that do require the location services to be on to be used. So like a good example, obviously a navigation app is going to need to know where you are to tell you where to go. Also, like in Arizona, we have online sports betting. You have to have your location services on because they need to know that you are in the state that allows that betting to take place. So there's different things like that. I mean, the apps want to know because they can do more stuff with the data, obviously. Sure. So sometimes it depends on which app you're using. But yeah, you can turn it all off and then just not have it. But then some apps they'll tell you, hey, this is not going to function, or you can't use it unless you give up that location info.
Yeah. I would think with the appeals court decision, I would think that would open the door up for other convictions to also go through appeals.
You would think. One thing, I did read the actual legit ruling from the court, and it basically, they tried to kind of shut that door a little bit and said basically that law enforcement in the past was acting on good faith in the other cases because they didn't know that this was a thing that was essentially violating. I mean, we have cases that happen all the time, right? That change the scope of the way that things go. And so they put that in there. That doesn't mean that there isn't going to still be people trying to go through and appeal the processes, but it is one of those types of situations where they at least have said it's not that law enforcement was acting in a way that they shouldn't have, so it doesn't necessarily make everything.
Yeah, I would think like, hey, well, if it worked for him, it should work for me, kind of.
Right? I mean, you got guys sitting in prison that are probably thinking that, hey, I should go check, and that's the other part, right? They might not even know that that's the whole process that got them to them. it should have been played out in court, but that if people have a chance to appeal the way the courts go with that, I'm sure they'll try it.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting because then you get into one of my favorite legal terms, fruit of the poisonous tree.
Yep.
Right.
And
so if that was deemed, if the geofencing was deemed inadmissible, then everything gathered after that
from the phone
could be inadmissible as well, and then you got to figure out a different way to collect that.
Well, and then and now this case we're talking just geofence is what it was referring on it. If you think also a geofence it's kind of like a tower dump, which is something that's been done for years when we're going to the phone companies and saying, okay, here's my crime, I need to see all of the phones that were hitting off these towers, and then we have to sift through that data and find common devices and things of that nature. It's a very similar process. So does this eventually impact that too? And that's why I'm thinking, again, that Supreme Court is going to eventually have to rule on this, because there's a lot at stake really on both sides for that to be heard and essentially ruled upon. So we know what to do going forward on the law enforcement side, and then try to figure out, okay, well, what's the next thing that we can use to help in aiding us to solve some of these crimes? Because like I said, there have been major cases that have been solved with those types of searches. That's why we have the process we have, is so that eventually the Supreme Court says yay or nay, this is a violation or it is not.
I think it was that a capital case that went through appeals?
I don't offhand. I think I want to say it was a robbery case. So I don't know that it wasn't a murder case. I know that.
Yeah. See, it seems like something like that. I could see the public as a whole, or even a judge, maybe not having a palate for something like a robbery.
Right.
But when you talk about either a rape or a murder
or a child crime, something
right, I could see that I'm like, well, I could see it going the other way. It's always interesting with those appeals, the actual case that's in front of them, right?
For sure.
And how that impacts the ruling.
Oh yeah, I know we've seen that on the local level with I've heard detectives tell me that certain judges, when it comes to those types of warrants, you have some that will question it big time or limit the scope and do a lot of things like that, and you'll have other ones that don't have as much of a problem with it. So because of that, I do think we need a higher up ruling, because now we're going off of more of, this is what the judge feels like it should be, and like that's not how the law works, right? Like that there's an interpretation still, but maybe not at that level. That is where that interpretation needs to be happening. It needs to come from higher up.
All right. So bottom line then, Mike, is that for now, for analysts, if they're using this geofencing, continue to use it, continue to get what you can, and then the courts and Google may change what they do in the future, but for right now, get what you can get.
Basically. Yeah, for right now it works. They said that pipeline's closing, so until it comes back with just straight up nothing, I would say keep trying, and then eventually, that, like I said, they have told us they're shutting it off. So
all right. Before I let you go, anything upcoming or anything you want to plug?
Yeah, talking about phone data and different things of that nature for the IACA webinar series for this next year. We're going to be doing a whole series, Sarah Totten and I from Virginia, on CDRs and how to use them. There's going to be a monthly installment, so we're going to cover each carrier. We're going to cover other apps and things of that nature, preparing for court, all that stuff. You'll have one a month, and I think we're shooting for an hour for those. So quick, get in, get some info, get out, and hope to have you guys join there.
All right. And is that something that if you only wanted to attend one, you could, or is that something you have to sign up the whole series in order to partake?
You can do either one. Honestly, if you see one that looks more appealing than the other, that works, but they're all going to be standalone. So you don't need to have one to do the other. There's no prerequisite or anything.
All right. And when do you anticipate that starting?
Should start in January. It'll be the first one. We'll do one a month. I think we're still figuring out the dates, so stay tuned on that. We'll put announcements out on the dates, but that you'll have one a month.
All right. So be on the lookout for that. It sounds like some interesting training that those that deal with a lot of telephone toll analysis, and I'm sure there's going to be stuff analysts can learn, whether they're new to the process or even experienced. So be on the lookout for that come the first of the year. All right, Mike, thank you so much for your time. It's always great catching up with you and doing these segments.
Thanks for having me.
All right, be safe.
You too.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. You can show your support by sharing this and other episodes found on our website at www.leapodcasts.com. If you have a topic you would like us to cover or have a suggestion for our next guest, please send us an email at leapodcasts@gmail.com. Till next time, analysts, keep talking.